Hey everyone, so One Piece chapter 999 just came out, and this was a great chapter. Not just for the content, but for how much content we got. Like, this felt like a very content-filled chapter, especially compared to last chapter, which was more so along the lines of big double-page spreads, epic shots, large panels that take up a lot of space, etc., etc. But this chapter, it really did feel like, from start to finish, I don't know, I felt like we got almost 2 chapters worth of content out of this. Maybe that's just me. But maybe it's the fact that it was split into, I guess, 2 parts, with the first part focusing on Ace and Yamato. And I was personally surprised that we got a look at their past so early on. I figured that we would get glimpses of what happened between those two as the battle progressed, but I suppose that now is as good a time as any because it was a very quick flashback. It didn't really disrupt the flow of events or anything like that. And it actually helped clear up a lot of the surrounding, thoughts and question marks regarding what were the Whitebeard pirates thinking regarding Kaido's takeover of Wano and everything that happened to Oden. But I'll elaborate on that in a minute. So first of all, just the Ace and Yamato dynamic. Ace's character, it's always fun for me to see Ace at the different stages of his life because you see the evolution of the character even though we don't get to see Ace for that long in terms of, actual chapter or panel time over the course of the series. The fact that we saw him as a kid, we saw him as an established member of the Whitebeard Pirates when he first met Luffy. We saw him in bits and pieces of him as a younger up-and-coming rookie when he was challenging Whitebeard, getting offers for Shichibukai, meeting with Shanks, etc. And then we finally saw him basically when he's facing the potential end of his life at the stand at Marineford. So this was basically, young up-and-coming Ace that we got to get another look at again. I will say that my favorite version of Ace or whatever, I know they're all the same character and it's just seeing different facets of his personality over the course of time. I know they're all the same character, but my favorite version of Ace was always the one that when we first met Ace in Alabasta and then continuing on up till basically Banaro Island and that duel. I really like that version of Ace. That version of Ace basically seemed the most secure with himself and where he was and what his goal in life was, which was to make Whitebeard the Pirate King. He was also the most laid back and confident at that point in time, at least I felt. But in this chapter, we got to see that younger, fiery, wants to take on the world and change everything version of Ace. The guy with, still a chip on his shoulder. The very first thing that he mentions, basically, with Yamato is talking about their fathers, right? And what is passed down from father to child and everything like that. So the fact that this Ace still very much had a lot of inner conflict. He is still going around with that chip on his shoulder, being Roger's child. And he sees that with Yamato right away. So it was, interesting to me to see basically, what was it that first got them to connect? Because lots of times we can assume that, 2 strong characters meet, they end up fighting, and then they just end up becoming friends for whatever reasons. We saw that with Ace and Jinbei, but it wasn't just as though Ace and Jinbei just fought and became friends. Ace actually had to be taken into Whitebeard's fold before eventually becoming somewhat allies or comrades with Jinbei to a degree. Although honestly, I guess Impel Down was where they really bonded. But the main thing being, with Ace and Yamato, I was wondering in terms of what could make them get along very quickly, if not for the fact that they're actually trying to go at each other's heads, basically. I suppose the fact that Oda chose to connect them based on their parents, and the fact that they both are they have a rebellious mentality towards their parents and their lineage, that was a smart decision by Oda to basically be like, okay, this is obviously something that they're both going to connect with. And it was good to see that, Ace very quickly realized that Yamato wants to rebel against Kaido as much as, I guess you could read into a little bit, as much as Ace feels like he's rebelling against Roger in everything that Ace is kind of trying to do, making his own name in the world, trying to go beyond Pirate King, etc. That is, if you believe the Ace novels. I don't know how much I consider those canon, but point being, I did like to see what those two ended up connecting over, which was one, anger against Kaido, but 2, the fact that they both are rebellious towards where they came from, who their parents are. So that was good to see. I definitely enjoyed watching them just interact once they were done with the fighting and were just kind of having fun and chilling. Yamato's expressions and everything like that. She's a very expressive character, which is fun to see because she's so strong and tough, but she's also a little childlike and naive, and you could get that from watching her listen to Ace's stories. So the thing that I really liked listening to from their conversation was, of course, Luffy obviously came up, but Oda's diligence with making sure to expand on what else is happening in the world, with Cavendish being the big name right around the corner. And that makes sense because right around this time, you know, Ace is still an up-and-coming rookie, but probably right behind him is Cavendish, and then behind him is the guys that we know as the worst generation, which is, of course, Law, Kidd, Capone Beige. It was interesting to me to see that Capone Beige's name was mentioned before, I guess. Hawkins, Apu, Drake, etc. I do personally feel, by the way, that something like that might be deliberate, just because with characters like Hawkins, Drake, Apu, at least among the fandom, what I see happening a lot, even Euroju you could throw in, amongst the fandom, what I see happening a lot is arguments about who falls where underneath that group of like Luffy and Kid, right? So everybody already gives Law respect just because we've seen so much of Law, but people are really, you know, thirsty to scale Drake. People really want to know how strong Apu is versus Drake, how strong Apu is versus Hawkins, stuff like that. I do think that Oda may be a little bit conscious of that and is not trying to give people anything else to go off. If, like he mentioned, if Ace were to have mentioned right here the big names being, you know, Kid, Law, and let's say Hawkins or something like that, then people are going to take that one way, versus if Ace had said Kid, Law, and Drake. Maybe Drake was still a Marine at this point, we don't know. Or you understand what I'm saying, if he'd said Kid, Law, and Apu, etc. People are going to take that and use that for their own scaling measures and everything like that. So it's just interesting to me that Oda used Beige. Alternatively, it could just be a reference to the fact that Beige has been around a lot longer. He's the oldest of the Supernova, as far as I can tell. And what's interesting is that Beige, he seemed to have the biggest reputation for what he did in the West Blue. From what I remember of Beige's mini backstory that we got in Whole Cake Island, where he did get a very big reputation of infiltrating large organizations and taking the head of their leader. And that's very interesting because that sounds like what he was up to before he even hit the Grand Line as a major pirate. So, all that being said, I really liked the little bit of world building we got from that, and I really, really enjoyed seeing Ace on Whitebeard's crew and just getting to see the perspective of the Whitebeard pirates, their reactions to everything that's been going on with Kaido in Wano, with Oden in Wano, the respect that they still hold for Oden and the status they still hold Oden to. And it was good just seeing Ace having that sort of, it's Luffy-esque, but there's more anger and fire behind it in everything that he wants to do. Whereas Luffy is more like, you know, Luffy wants to be, he's going to want to go after Kaido and such as well, but he's more of a happy-go-lucky type, like, oh, I just have to go to Alabasta and kick Crocodile's butt. That's his sort of mentality, and obviously Luffy's going to get that fire once the time comes, but Ace has that same mentality, but the attitude towards it is different, and I really like how that sets the two brothers up as similar, but, you know, they have their own tendencies and what makes them special. And there's still a reason why Ace is, you know, he's going to be towards the top of most popularity polls today, because that is a very, you know, a character type that resonates with a lot of people. So, good to see young Ace. The one thing I am interested in seeing is basically how much of young Ace, and like the fact that Ace was in Wano before this, we got to see Ace in Wano and his interactions with Yamato. We got a glimpse of Ace and Tama, though really, really a minor glimpse. I am very interested in seeing, like, what is the actual significance of this? Is this meant more so just to be like a little callback to Ace's general existence, the fact that this is an ongoing motivation or important factor in Luffy's life and what's driven him to get stronger to where he is now to challenge the Yonko, and Luffy just following in Ace's footsteps? Is it more so just providing that sort of context and framework around this? Or is there some other message that's going to slowly develop around what Ace did in Wano and how that's going to play into what Luffy's going to do in Wano? So I wonder if this is the last of the Ace flashbacks. I personally want to see more. I will acknowledge I was totally wrong about, you know, the Ace ended up being beaten by Kaido and working for Kaido. The one thing I did not think about is the possibility, we talked about this at the end of last chapter, that, like, you know, if Ace made it to Onigashima and Ace would have wanted to fight Kaido, those parts of it were true. Ace made it to Onigashima, he wanted to fight Kaido. My next thought was that, well, maybe Kaido beat him. That makes sense, Kaido would beat Ace. And then Kaido forced him to work for him for a little bit, maybe by threatening his crew or something like that. That stuff didn't happen because I didn't expect that the possibility of, what if Kaido just wasn't there? What if Kaido and all of his strongest officers were off doing something else? So, we missed that. I was wrong on that. Still interesting to see that, you know, Ace's role in Wano, at least what it was in the past, is a little more significant than just running into Tama and saying, hey, I'll come back for you one day. There's something a little bit more to it. I am interested. The one thing I'm kind of questioning is why is it that there were kids trapped on Onigashima? I might have misread that or misunderstood that, but as I understood, it seemed like Kaido did have, kids or hostages maybe even at this point in time trapped at Onigashima that they saved. Maybe I misunderstood that. Maybe that requires a reread, but that remains to be seen. Share your theories below. Beyond that, back to the present. So in the present, we have, first of all, Brook and Robin seem like they're going to be going up on their own, so they're going to be going up the stairs to get to the top, whereas Zoro is going up with Marco. I feel like Marco could carry all of them, but maybe it would be too much of a burden with King and Queen bearing down on them, so maybe that's a smart call. That does make things a little bit easier. It would look a little weird, I suppose, if it was like Robin and Brook and Zoro all... In my mind, I imagine them like riding Marco like on Marco's back, but I guess just Marco just like taking his talons and like lifting Zoro and flying up. That makes more sense. I don't know how effective Zoro is going to be just being carried around. What's interesting is, okay, let's talk about Robin and Brook first. This does fit in my mind, the idea that Robin and Brook, at the very least Robin running into Black Maria and that becoming her opponent. Brook, there is the possibility of Brook basically fighting side by side with Robin against Black Maria. Or there is one floating character whose matchup I'm still interested in seeing, which is Fukurokuju. We don't know how strong he is. We know that there's been a lot of hype around the Oniwabanshu in general. Hype I use in a loose term. Oda hasn't like hyped them up a bunch, but there has been some spotlight put on them. We're being reminded that they are a somewhat significant part of the Beast Pirates forces. At the very least, I would expect, if none of them, because we've seen them get kind of knocked around, slapped around a bunch, but if none of them, at the very least Fukurokuju, I would be interested in seeing how strong he is. At the very least, they talked very highly of Hyogoro back in the day, and Fukurokuju sounded like Hyogoro's counterpart in a sense. So I hope that we get to see him fight. If we do, I wouldn't be surprised if, maybe Brook is going to end up as Fukurokuju's opponent, and Robin ends up making it to Black Maria. So this is all with the context of basically, this is the final battle. And by the way, so I was alerted over the course of the past week, basically, that like at least in chapter reviews, I should not keep mentioning if this is the final battle, if this is the raid. I think you guys know my stance at this point, so I'm going to leave that. I'll talk a little bit about it at the end again, but I'm just going to stop saying if this is that or if this is that. Let's just talk as though this is basically... We're going to talk about what's happening as though the direction it seems it's headed is the direction it's going to be going, okay? So let's say that we're lining up final matchups. Robin versus Black Maria, that seems like a good bet to me. I think that would free Sanji up to go after Queen. It would be very interesting, especially if King and Queen are blocking the way for Zoro and Marco for a little bit. And what we end up getting is Sanji being freed, perhaps by Robin, freeing Sanji up to take on Queen. Then maybe Marco stalls King for a little bit, and Zoro gets to go up onto the roof. Everybody gets to see Zoro versus Kaido for a little bit. What's interesting to me is that Marco mentioned that he doesn't have a personal grudge against, like, he's not interested in taking on Kaido at the moment. He would definitely be helpful, but I can understand. I don't think any of us really need to see Marco versus Kaido. I would rather see Marco versus King at the moment. Obviously, I would rather see Zoro get, like, a really good extended fight against King. But you could look at the possibility of maybe Marco stalls King for a little bit, maybe Zoro versus Kaido for a little bit, then Zoro versus King. I don't really know how the order of events is going to happen. I do think that Zoro is going to at least get one big individual fight outside of getting in on the action against Kaido. But I could definitely see with Marco's statement that he's not personally interested in fighting Kaido right now, I could definitely see Marco basically being used as a stall tactic to keep King out of the situation for a little bit and go toe-to-toe with Marco. I do hope we don't see Marco, like, lose to King, just because Marco hasn't had... It's not Marco's fault. It's more so cool that Marco has gone up against so many strong opponents and still keeps... You know what I mean? The fact that Marco has fought Admirals, he has fought Blackbeard with both Blackbeard's fruits, he's fought Big Mom briefly. It seems like he's about to go up against King and Queen, or at least King, or at least Queen, or something like that. And it's not like Marco's beating any of these people. If you think about it, Marco hasn't actually beaten anyone particularly strong. And we all know, I don't think most people think that Marco could beat like a Kainu, or he could beat Kizaru, or we saw him lose to Blackbeard. It looked like he basically got caught by Big Mom, although she mentioned she didn't have the souls to deal with him. We haven't seen Marco get like a big win necessarily, but at the same time, put it into context, everybody's going up against are really, really some of the strongest characters in the world. So it's more so cool that Marco is even able to be a problem to these guys. So you can look at it in that context, or you could look at it in the context of like, oh, I really need to see Marco actually beat somebody at this point. So if Marco loses to King, I think some people would be maybe a little disappointed in Marco. To me, it makes sense that they would both be about even. They seem to have very similar, fighting styles. They're both flying Devil Fruit users. They're both the first commanders of their respective crews. I do think it would just be a very even matchup. Makes sense. Reinforces the idea that Yonko crews are roughly about the same. King is someone that Marco, in theory, should not lose to, you know what I mean? Because they're both their first mates of their crews, so it should be a somewhat even battle. But I could also use this as an example to say, well, Marco's been out of the action for a year now. He's wearing glasses now. He's basically semi-retired, so that could be used as an excuse if Marco were to lose to King, if Marco mentions that he's rusty or something like that. All very speculative. We don't even know if Marco's actually going to be fighting King. I just look at those two flying creatures and I'm like, they're going to fight for a little bit. Something's going to happen, right? Beyond that, the ending section of Kaido and Big Mom talking to each other, that was interesting. So this was one of the longer Kaido Big Mom interactions that we've ever actually had. It was actually really good to hear because now that I think about it, so we've seen them together in chapters many a time before. We've seen them clash, we've seen them exchange, barbs, we've seen them celebrate the idea that, hey, we're going to team up, we're going to go after the One Piece, etc. This was the first, I think, dialogue that they've had between each other, with each other, right? The first somewhat extended dialogue. I don't know if that's 100% true, maybe you can fact check me on that, but this is the first sort of dialogue where they delve a little bit into their past, their goals, their expectations, what they're aiming for right now, and their general feelings towards each other. It wasn't really long, but it was interesting to see because these are obviously two of the most powerful characters in the universe. We're still trying to figure out how solid their alliance actually is, how much tension is actually in between the two, and we've wanted to know for a long time what the debt is that Kaido owes Big Mom. So before I get into the fish stuff, let's just talk about the Kaido and Big Mom dynamic. So Big Mom basically bites back at she snaps back at the notion that Kaido is basically saying like, oh, you're looking to betray me, basically. That's at least what he hints at when Big Mom first references the road poneglyph, right? So then Kaido's immediately on edge. He's saying, you're looking to betray me, something along those lines. Big Mom snaps back being like, no, you're like a little brother to me. I would not hold... I don't know about that. I think at the very least at the moment, Big Mom is trying to make it seem as though she's 100% on board with Kaido. I doubt that... I don't care if Kaido's like a little brother to Big Mom. We've seen what Big Mom does to her own children. So saying, oh, you're like a little brother to me, that means nothing coming from Big Mom. We've seen what Big Mom does with alliances. We've seen her and the Germa. We know what Big Mom is actually about. And I do feel with the importance of alliances being played up a lot throughout this arc, I do think it would make more sense that the villain's alliance would be a little less sturdy than the protagonist alliance. The ones who are actually working with legitimate bonds between each other, who actually care for each other, etc., etc. I don't think that Kaido and Big Mom's alliance is going to be as strong as what we're seeing from the quote-unquote good guys, right? At the very least, I do think that this puts an end... I don't think people were like shipping Kaido and Big Mom that hard, but there were just like a lot of theories that like, I don't think anyone even wants to see that necessarily. Maybe young Big Mom, but you know what I mean? But at the very least, people were saying that, Kaido's the father of Big Mom's children, maybe Katakuri, something like that. That was a going theory. People were saying that Kaido and Big Mom were romantically involved in the past, stuff like that. I think this does confirm that, Big Mom, first of all, is probably somewhat older than Kaido, maybe a half generation up or something like that. And she does view him more as a little brother than anything else. So they are buddy-buddy at this point, but I think that's basically... First of all, that's, in my mind, that's a front. And Kaido has referenced throughout this arc that you'll see what happens when the going gets tough, pirates betray each other, right? I think that's definitely more likely to happen on Kaido's side than on the Straw Hat side. But beyond that, yeah, they've been buddy-buddy, at least on the surface. But it's not a romantic relationship here that we're getting. So that helps clarify that to a degree. It also helps clarify that everybody still views Nico Robin as important, which is a minor point, but it could be a major point down the line, so let's keep that on hold. And then lastly, the idea that, you know, Kaido's fruit is not a dragon fruit, it's a fish fruit. So I actually, after I read this chapter, I did see other comments, and one of the comments, I don't know if I want to say it right here, basically. After looking a little more into what this person said, I saw this in a few places, basically. Well, I guess, yeah, I'll just share it here, basically. The koi fish, right? People were referencing the Japanese myth of the koi fish. I have a video coming out on this on Sunday, once the official comes out, so at least I can wait for everybody to read the chapter, and then I can put out the theory video. But the Japanese koi fish, there's a myth around that, and I'll say no more, basically, but I definitely buy into that, and not just for the fact that it matches up what we're seeing, you know, with Kaido's abilities, but also just the fact that it can say a lot about Kaido's character, and that's mostly what that video is going to be about. How the reveal that Kaido actually has a fish fruit, and the significance of that specific fish fruit, which I'll expand upon later, what that means for Kaido's character and the arc in general, and just the ideas that Wano is seemingly being built on. I think it's very, very interesting. I think it's a really cool, it's not a huge twist, but I think it's a cool mini twist that Oda's giving on Kaido's abilities that actually adds a lot of significance to his character and what Oda's trying to say, or the direction Oda's going to be taking with his character and what Kaido's past is actually like. So look forward to that video, but I definitely thought it was a cool twist. At first, I was just confused, but you know, you go back and read comments. I thought it was a mistranslation for a little bit, but you go back and read comments. The ideas that people dropped, the koi fish in particular, made a ton of sense to me. So that's pretty much all for this chapter. I thought that this was a really content-filled chapter. In terms of whether or not I think that this is the end of the arc, here's what I'm going to say. I'm going to wait till the end of Act 3. That's all. I'm going to wait till the end of Act 3. If we get to the end of Act 3 and the raid hasn't failed, it's over. But I was completely wrong. I'll put out a video acknowledging all that. I'll talk about it, okay? If we get to the end of Act 3, because Act 3 is the act that is generally meant to be the act of tragedy, okay? We're not going to get to Act 4 and then the raid fails or something like that. So that's basically my stance at this point. We're not going to go back and forth over this in each review with me talking about like, oh, this makes me think yes, this makes me think no. We're going to wait till the end of Act 3. At the end of Act 3, they're still, you know, flying high, things look like on pace, then I was definitely wrong. If we get to the end of Act 3 and, you know, everything's in shambles, the Straws are completely defeated, the raid has failed, then obviously I was correct. But we're just going to wait till the end of Act 3. It's probably not that far off. It could be 45 chapters if you want to go off that pattern that we've been seeing. It's, you know, it's hard to say if like 2 acts is a pattern just yet, but Act 1 was 15 chapters, Act 2 was 30 chapters. It is very possible that Act 3 will be 45 chapters. Alternatively, you could flip it the other way and say Act 1 was 15, Act 2 might be 30, Act 2 was 30, maybe Act 3 is 60. That's also a pattern. Remains to be seen. But that's all for this video, and I will talk to you all later.